I have a bomb! If anyone comes closer, I'll detonate it immediately! Imagine you're at an airport, ready to board your flight, when suddenly, chaos erupts. A single voice sends shockwaves through the terminal. What would you do? How would you react? And who will have the courage to stop what could turn into a disaster? Welcome back to Seeds of Goodness. In today's episode, we dive into the gripping, real-life moment when one man's quick thinking changed everything. Stay tuned, you won't want to miss this. In a peaceful suburb of Los Angeles on a small street, there was an old yet always bustling boxing gym. Inside, the steady sound of fists hitting punching bags echoed, mingling with the trainer's instructions and the heavy breathing of young fighters. This gym was not a grand facility, lacking dazzling lights or million-dollar sponsorship deals, but for those who stepped inside, it was a home of discipline, passion, and perseverance. The founder and operator of this gym was Jack Coleman, a name once widely mentioned in the world of professional American boxing. Jack competed in the middleweight division and won many prestigious titles. Standing at 6 feet tall, he possessed powerful punches and a highly strategic fighting style. But what made him truly special was not just his strength, but his patience. In the ring, Jack was not a reckless or overly aggressive fighter. He was someone who knew how to wait. He never rushed. He always knew when to defend, when to counterattack, and most importantly, when to land the decisive blow. But the boxing ring is not forever. After more than 2 decades of battles, his body was not the same as before. Scars on his cheeks, persistent injuries in his knees and shoulders reminded him that youth was not eternal. More importantly, Jack realized he could no longer sacrifice his health and time for brutal matches when his family needed him more than ever. So he decided to retire at the peak of his career, something not many fighters could do. After hanging up his gloves, Jack opened a small boxing gym where he trained young enthusiasts, helping them not only become great fighters, but also individuals with strong willpower. He taught them patience, discipline, emotional control, and above all, respect for their opponents, values he believed were more important than fame. However, no matter how passionate he was about boxing, for Jack, family was everything. He was a father of 5 and a devoted husband to his wife, Laura. Despite his busy schedule as a trainer, he always made time for his family, never missing his children's important events. He was no longer in the ring, but he still fought every day to protect and take care of those he loved most. Today was a special day. Jack was at Los Angeles International Airport, seeing off his wife and children on their long-awaited summer vacation to Hawaii. Laura, his wife, was an intelligent, patient woman who always understood him. She knew Jack loved his coaching job, knew he couldn't leave the gym at this moment. Still, she couldn't help but feel a little regret about being apart from him for the next few weeks. "Are you sure you're not coming with us?" she asked, looking at him lovingly. Jack smiled slightly, holding her hand, his voice warm. "I'd love to go, but there's too much work at the gym. Promise me you and the kids will have a great time." The kids were beyond excited. Ryan, the eldest son, 17 years old, had been planning the trip for weeks. The 12-year-old twin girls, Emily and Sophia, wouldn't stop talking about the beaches they would visit. The youngest, Leo, 7 years old, clung tightly to Jack's leg, pleading, "Dad, come with us. It won't be fun without you." Jack chuckled, ruffling his son's hair. "I know, buddy, but there are things I can't leave unfinished. I promise, next time I'll go with you all, okay?" Leo pouted, but eventually let go. After completing check-in procedures, Laura and the kids moved towards the security checkpoint. Jack stayed behind, watching them, feeling a slight emptiness as they walked away. Laura turned back, waving with a warm smile, though her eyes held a trace of worry. Jack nodded and waved back. His 3 children, Ryan, Emily, and Leo, excitedly chatted about golden beaches and big waves in Hawaii. Ryan, the 14-year-old eldest, was particularly eager to try surfing for the first time. Jack smiled, but inside he felt a small void. He knew he couldn't join this trip. His boxing gym was in the crucial phase of preparing for the regional tournament, and his young trainees needed him more than ever. He turned to leave the airport when a sharp voice cut through his thoughts. "Stop! Everyone stay still!" The shout pierced through the airport's calm atmosphere like a knife. Jack spun around, and years of instinct from the boxing ring kicked in immediately. He scanned the security checkpoint, where an older man, about 65, was holding a young female security officer hostage. A sharp blade glistened against her throat. The girl, later identified as Megan Carter, was a 21-year-old security officer who had only been on the job for a few months. She trembled, eyes wide with fear, but dared not move an inch. Sweat rolled down her forehead as she clenched her hands tightly, trying to stay calm. The attacker had thinning silver hair, a gaunt face lined with deep wrinkles, but his eyes were not those of a madman. They were eyes filled with desperation, of someone pushed to the edge. He shouted again, his voice hoarse but forceful. "I have a bomb! If anyone comes closer, I'll detonate it immediately!" He held up an old cell phone, his thumb trembling over the screen, as if one press could end everything in flames. No one knew whether he really had a bomb, but his threat was enough to make the entire airport tense with fear. Panic erupted instantly. Passengers screamed, scrambling towards emergency exits. A mother clutching her baby stumbled and fell, the child's cries merging with the chaotic shouts. A group of foreign tourists, perhaps not fully understanding the situation, stood frozen, gripping their luggage, eyes darting around for an escape. At a distance, a ticket counter employee named Sarah, a middle-aged woman with hastily tied curly hair, shouted into her radio, her voice shaky. "We need immediate assistance! There's an attacker at the security checkpoint!" Jack's eyes darted to his family. He exhaled in relief upon seeing that Laura and the children were being quickly escorted to safety by an airport staff member. Laura turned back, her eyes full of concern, but he signaled for her to keep moving. He didn't want his family caught in this life-and-death situation unfolding before him. Turning his focus back to the scene, Jack locked onto Megan. She was still trapped in the attacker's grip, her face pale, lips pressed tightly to suppress a sob. The airport police swiftly arrived, weapons drawn, but no one dared act recklessly. A middle-aged officer, likely the team leader, named Daniel Rivera, raised a hand to signal his team to hold their positions. He shouted, his voice tense but steady, "Let her go! We're willing to listen to your demands." The attacker sneered, eyes full of disdain. "Demands? I have no demands. I just want you all to know that I have nothing left to lose." His voice cracked, a mix of anger and agony. Nearby, an independent journalist named Kathy Hiles, who happened to be at the airport to pick up a friend, had pulled out her phone and was recording the entire situation. She crouched behind a pillar, trying to keep her hands steady to capture the tense moment. Whispering to herself, she said, "If I survive this, this will be the biggest news story of my career." Jack clenched his fists, his breathing slowing as he assessed the situation. He knew standing still was not an option. If no one acted, Megan might lose her life, but he also understood that charging in recklessly would only make things worse. He needed to use his boxing experience, patience, reading his opponent, and striking at the precise moment. Taking a deep breath, he slowly stepped forward, hands raised to show he was unarmed. The surrounding crowd held their breath, some whispering, "Is he crazy?" Jack locked eyes with the attacker, his voice calm and steady. "You don't want to do this." The attacker snapped his gaze to Jack, wary. "You think you know who I am?" Jack shook his head, never breaking eye contact. "I don't know who you are, but I know you're not a killer." The attacker let out a dry chuckle, but it wasn't a laugh of confidence. It was the bitter laugh of a man who had long been exhausted by life. "You don't know a damn thing," he growled, gripping the knife tighter, causing Megan to whimper in pain. Jack remained unfazed. He continued speaking, his tone calm but persuasive. "Then tell me, why are you doing this?" The attacker hesitated for a moment, his eyes flickering with doubt. In that brief instant, Jack realized that the man was not entirely in control of his emotions. That was the opening he needed. "They took everything from me," the man finally began, his voice trembling. "The government, this rotten system. I had a family, a stable job. But then what? My wife got sick and I had no money for treatment. My daughter, she left me. I lost everything." His voice cracked, and tears rolled down his weary face. He was no longer just an anonymous terrorist. He was Edward Grant, a man crushed by life's merciless weight. Jack took a slow breath, keeping his voice steady. I'm sorry, you've suffered a lot. Edward stared at him, his expression unreadable. Sorry? Do you have any idea what it's like to lose everything? Jack nodded, his gaze shadowed by past pain. He remembered his own struggles, the time he lost his brother in an accident and almost gave up boxing forever. I do, he said. I've lost people I loved. I know what helplessness feels like, the feeling of having nothing left to hold on to. But if you do this, it won't bring anything back. Edward's eyes narrowed. His grip on the knife loosened slightly, but he still wasn't letting go. Jack pressed forward. I want to help you, but you have to let her go. Megan barely breathed, her eyes filled with a fragile hope. The entire airport held its breath, frozen in anticipation. The security team remained in position, their guns trained on Edward, but none dared to act. Edward hesitated. This was the turning point. Jack locked eyes with him, his voice firm. I'm not lying to you. I have no weapons. I'm not a cop. I'm just a man trying to stop you from making a mistake you'll regret. Edward swallowed hard, his thumb hovering over the old phone's screen. And then, after what felt like an eternity, he shoved Megan forward. She stumbled to the ground and was immediately pulled to safety by an officer. But the ordeal wasn't over yet. In the next second, Edward grabbed Jack, pressing the knife against his ribs. You think I'll let you go just like that? He hissed, his breath hot against Jack's face. Jack remained calm, despite the cold steel biting against his side. I don't expect you to, but I don't care. Edward's brow furrowed in confusion. Jack continued, his voice unwavering. I don't care if I get hurt. What matters is that she's safe. And now, you're holding someone who's willing to talk to you. Edward's breathing became erratic, his fingers trembling. Jack could see that the man was unraveling. This was the moment he had been waiting for. But before Jack could make his move, an unexpected interruption changed everything. A middle-aged man in the crowd, Doug Reed, a retired firefighter, suddenly lunged forward, shouting, Let him go! Doug raised a plastic airport chair, ready to strike. Jack immediately yelled, Stop! Back away! He knew that any reckless action could push Edward over the edge. Doug hesitated, confused, but then retreated as he realized the danger. Edward turned toward Doug, shouting, You want to die too? He raised the old phone higher, his thumb trembling over the screen. Jack quickly seized the opportunity to draw Edward's focus back to himself. You don't have to do this, he said, his voice sharp but controlled. Look at me. I'm here. I'm listening. Edward's gaze darted between rage and uncertainty. Jack knew his time was running out. He had to act the moment the next opportunity presented itself. Jack could feel the blade pressing against his side. Every breath he took had to be careful to avoid provoking Edward. The attacker was shaking, not from fear but from the chaos raging inside him. Jack had slowly chipped away at his control. He was no longer shouting in madness but speaking in disjointed, conflicted sentences, torn between anger and despair. You think you're a hero? Edward growled, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. You won't change anything. Jack didn't respond immediately. He knew that words were secondary now. Action was everything. He had faced dangerous opponents in the ring before, and he understood that the strongest fighter was not the one who threw the first punch, but the one who waited for the right moment. Then suddenly a loud noise echoed from the emergency exit. A young boy, about 10 years old, had accidentally dropped his mother's suitcase in his panic. The loud crash sent a ripple through the tense silence. The entire crowd flinched. That was the moment Jack had been waiting for. With the speed and precision of a seasoned boxer, Jack twisted his body, his left hand locking around Edward's wrist. He tightened his grip, feeling the bones in Edward's wrist strain under pressure. Edward gasped, trying to yank his hand back, but Jack had him trapped. Without giving his opponent a chance to react, Jack pivoted his hips and yanked Edward forward. The sudden motion threw Edward off balance. Jack seized the moment, driving his knee hard into Edward's stomach. A sharp gasp escaped Edward's lips as he doubled over, breath caught in his throat. But Edward wasn't giving up. Despite the pain, he held onto the knife, his eyes wild with desperation. Jack had expected this. With one swift motion, he pressed his thumb into a pressure point on Edward's wrist, a technique he had learned from years of training with martial arts masters. Edward let out a strangled cry, his grip finally failing. The knife clattered onto the floor. Jack immediately kicked the blade away, but he knew disarming Edward wasn't enough. The man was still dangerous. Edward swung a desperate punch at Jack's face. Jack tilted his head, feeling the rush of air as the fist barely missed. He didn't let emotion cloud his judgment. This was not the time for anger or fear. He shifted his weight, twisting Edward's arm behind his back while sweeping his leg under Edward's. The older man lost his footing and crashed onto the ground with a heavy thud. But Jack wasn't done. He pinned Edward's chest down with his knee, locking both of his arms behind his back with practiced ease. Edward struggled, screaming, "Let me go!" But the pain and Jack's strength kept him pinned. Jack looked into his eyes and said calmly but firmly, "It's over." Within seconds, airport police rushed in. Officer Daniel Rivera pressed down on Edward's back, snapping handcuffs onto his wrists. Click, click. The sound of metal locking into place signaled the end of the nightmare. "We got him!" Rivera shouted, signaling his team to secure the area. Jack exhaled, his breath steady despite his heart pounding. A heavy silence filled the security checkpoint. Then, a slow round of applause broke out. It started with Megan Carter, the young officer who had nearly lost her life, and soon spread through the entire crowd. Passengers, airport staff, even Kathy Hiles, the journalist still filming, cheered and clapped. Some wept in relief, others embraced in gratitude. Megan rushed to Jack, her voice shaking. Are you okay?" Jack looked at his hand, noticing a small cut from the knife, blood trickling from it. He shrugged, smiling slightly. "It's just a scratch." But to everyone watching, it was far from a small matter. They had just witnessed a man who risked his life to save another. A legend in the boxing world, a hero in real life. As the chaos settled, Doug Reed, the retired firefighter who had attempted to intervene earlier, approached Jack, his face filled with guilt. "I'm sorry," Doug said. "I just wanted to help, but I think I made things worse." Jack placed a firm hand on Doug's shoulder, his voice calm and understanding. "You had good intentions. That's what matters. But sometimes the right action is knowing when to stand back." Doug nodded, his eyes reflecting newfound respect. Not far away, Kathy Hiles, the journalist who had recorded the entire event, hurried over, microphone in hand, her excitement barely contained. "Sir, I'm a freelance journalist. Can you tell us what motivated you to act so courageously?" Jack thought for a moment before replying with quiet conviction. "I couldn't just stand by while someone was in danger. That's what anyone should do." But to the people around him, it wasn't something just anyone could do. It was the act of a true hero. A team of bomb disposal experts was immediately dispatched to inspect Edward's belongings. The result, no bomb. It had all been an empty threat, meant to incite panic. Edward Grant was not part of any organized terrorist group. He was simply a man pushed to his breaking point by life's hardships. But regardless of his motives, his actions were still a serious crime. 3 months later, Edward Grant's trial took place under intense media scrutiny. The final verdict, 12 years in prison for the following charges: unlawful hostage-taking, threatening to kill, endangering public safety. When the sentence was read, Edward did not resist or shout as he had before. He simply bowed his head in silence, as if he had finally accepted that it was all over. Jack was not present at the trial. He had never considered this a victory. To him, it was just a situation he could not turn away from. While Edward Grant faced his punishment, Jack Coleman's story spread across America. Videos capturing the moment he confronted and subdued the attacker went viral at an incredible speed. The media hailed him as a true hero. Even the President of the United States personally issued a statement recognizing his bravery. Jack Coleman has demonstrated extraordinary courage and responsibility. He not only saved a life, but also prevented what could have been a tragedy for hundreds of people. America is proud of him. At a special ceremony at the White House, Jack was awarded the Presidential Medal of Bravery, one of the highest honors given to citizens for acts of heroism. As he stepped up to receive the medal, hundreds in attendance rose to their feet, applauding him. But Jack simply bowed his head humbly. Taking the microphone, he spoke in his deep, steady voice, each word carrying weight. "I'm not a hero. I just did what anyone should do." It wasn't just America that honored him. The global sports community also celebrated Jack Coleman. The World Boxing Council, WBC, one of the most prestigious boxing organizations, decided to award him an honorary medal, recognizing him as a champion of humanity. During the award ceremony, WBC President Mauricio Sulaiman addressed the audience. Jack Coleman is not only a champion in the ring, but also a champion in life. He doesn't just possess physical strength, he has a great heart. We are honored to present him with this title. At the ceremony in Las Vegas, attended by boxing legends from around the world, Jack once again received a standing ovation from the sports community. Yet when asked about his feelings, he remained as humble as ever. "I didn't do this for medals or recognition, I just did what was right." Simple words, yet profoundly powerful. After the incident, Jack's boxing gym received hundreds of messages of congratulations and support. His wife, Laura, though still shaken when recalling that day, was immensely proud of her husband. Jack has always been the kind of man who can't stand by when someone is in danger. He was our family's hero long before the world knew his name. His children also couldn't hide their admiration. His eldest son, Ryan, shared his thoughts on a television program. "My dad never liked being called a hero, but to me, he's always been the greatest hero." Jack Coleman's story wasn't just about a man who bravely took down an attacker. It was a story about responsibility, the courage to act when needed, and compassion, even for those who have lost their way. Bravery isn't the absence of fear. It's taking action despite the danger. Compassion can change even the most dangerous situations. Anyone can be a hero, not through strength, but through the determination to protect what is right.